Greetings everyone and welcome to Brickcats. Today I am reviewing PiXEL-DAN's rendition of Obi-Wan Kenobi's Delta-7 Jedi Interceptor. As always, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, leave me a comment, or supporting what I do in any other way you see fit. I greatly appreciate it. Obi-Wan's Delta-7 took him to both Kamino and Geonosis in Attack of the Clones, and according to the Star Wars wiki, these fighters were designed to be as responsive as possible due to the Jedi pilot's force-sensitive capabilities. Also of note, the astromech was hardwired into the ship as the hull was too thin to accommodate the standard astromech droid body. As such, this is the Episode 2 version of the Delta-7. During the Clone Wars show, the updated version had the astromech sitting right in front of the cockpit about here, and this is the original version. Bricklink's algorithm gave me 3 stores and just $37 without shipping and tax for the vanilla parts list and the stand, and that comes out to about $55 including shipping and tax. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics and model features, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I close out with my overall impression and pricing information. If you're watching this review, I assume you bought the instructions or are interested in buying them. I also assume a basic level of familiarity with Bricklink's ordering system and LEGO nomenclature. I only use genuine LEGO bricks, and I always purchase the instructions, and I create these reviews for my own personal enjoyment, and in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. The Delta-7 measures 11.5 inches long, 5.75 inches wide, and sits about 3 inches off the surface when it's on its landing gear, 2.5 inches without the landing gear, and on the stand here it's about 6.25 inches off the table. This is fairly large for a minifigure scale model, but to be fair, a minifigure scale Delta-7 would be really small, as in canon it's only about 8 meters long. The nose uses some headlight bricks and slope pieces to create the dagger shape, and this is a lot like the UCS model. And initially I was a little worried this would be structurally weak, but it's actually very strong. In this next section, I really appreciated, you can just see them there, the use of the lime green 1x6 plate right underneath these white tiles. And these are intended to represent the very narrow green stripes on either side of the center line you can see in the picture here. There are some visible gaps right by this wedge here, you can kind of see behind, but at most angles that's not too big of a deal. And representations of the cannons come next, with these inverted brackets, modified tiles, and cheese slopes right here. These look slightly out of position to me. If anything, I think they should be moved maybe one stud towards the center line. So if you really wanted to, you could replace this 1x3 dark red tile with a plate or something and move it in. But the cannons in the film model are actually pretty small, so another option could be to use some different pieces, and one thought that came to mind was the 1x1 double curved slope piece in dark red, part 49307. And if you took out this tile, you could stick it there, and it would just be a small little bump, which I think is more accurate to what we see in Attack of the Clones. Using this means you lose the representation of a barrel that the modified tiles give you, so that's a trade-off for sure. In short, I don't think there's a really great option to get these cannons quite right given the current piece count, or piece inventory. Either way, the cannons certainly don't look bad. It's a little unfortunate that these cheese slopes add a little bit of extra height on top of the bracket there. You could use some 2x1 curved slopes as well, and this was the original piece, I think, as it's used in the renders on the Rebrickable page. But it's a shame that LEGO hasn't made these 1x1 inverted brackets in dark red. A lot of times people use reddish brown, as that kind of blends in, but dark bluish gray works fine too. The rest of the wings are very nicely shaped and colored with the 6x3 wedge pieces in dark red on top and the bottom, and in black to form this edge right here, for some additional screen accuracy. This section here represents the wing vents, which I think perhaps could be a little bigger and perhaps moved a little farther back, but the wedge pieces do limit your options for keeping the white outline flush with the rest of the wing. The trailing edges of the wing do angle back, and they have some greebling connected with this clip. R4 sits on the port side while the Republic logo is opposite. A turntable might be nice for R4, but this wouldn't be hard to add. Unfortunately, the turntable base piece doesn't come in dark red, so you'd have to use either standard red or black. Either way, I think it would stick out a little bit, but just without being able to move, this looks okay. In the middle section in front of the cockpit, I definitely like the sloped subassembly, rather. And you can see it's just a very smooth transition from this section down to the front here. And this definitely looks a lot better than the wedge pieces they tend to use in the official sets. Here is the latest one. So if you take a look at the profile of this compared to the profile of this, pretty stark contrast. I also like the color detailing around here, and this is a pretty good approximation of what we see in the film models. The cockpit has some representation of instrumentations along with that printed 1x1 round tile there. And this is one area I think version 2, or a version 2, could improve on. The cockpit in the movie is actually quite snug. You can see Obi-Wan kind of squeezing in there. And if I put the minifigure in here, let's see, there's a lot of room. He doesn't sit all the way back against his backrest there because of that 1x2 G-slope. You can barely see in the bottom. And there's just a lot of room around the edges here. So I just feel like there's a lot of extra space. Not really a problem, just kind of an observation. The section behind the cockpit continues the color scheme fairly well. Depending on your preference, you could substitute this cheese slope out with a lime green one. And this orange cheese slope represents a little decal or something, or another kind of indicator that it is printed on the hull. You could change this out, I thought, maybe with a 1x1 Republic logo tile as well. I really like this dark red triangle piece here to, again, accurately represent the color scheme. And the two engines in the back are pretty standard fare with 2x2 round assemblies, with a trans red 1x1 round plate with a hole to represent the engine glow. On the underside of the ship, the landing gear folds down with fingered hinges. And there are 3 skids, one at the front and 2 in the back. So it does sit down very nicely on a flat surface. I also like how the landing gear are accurate to the movie, like these two fold down laterally from the center line, and this one is in line with the long axis of the ship. So let's see if I can get a better angle here. So that's pretty cool. And the underside in general is mostly anti-studs, as you would expect. There is some maintaining of the color scheme, but without adding a ton of parts, I think it would be difficult to get this exactly where it would need to be strictly accurate. And honestly, I don't think that's very important in this model. The designer recommends a stand that he created for another one of his models, and this does hold the fighter at a nice angle. And it looks pretty good as well. The stand doesn't flip back and forth between various angles like some other stands do, but if you change the location of this Technic pin, you can move it up a couple spots. You could make this more level if you wanted to, but I just built this as specified and it's perfectly fine. Overall, I think this is a great looking model in both form and scale. This seems much closer to a scaled down UCS version of the Delta-7 than a playset. And I only mean that as a compliment. I think the designer has done a really good job eliminating the ugly gaps that the playsets tend to have. Again, by comparison, this is the newest one, 75-333, I believe. And there's gaps along the wings here, really prominent ones actually, because that's the only major one, but it's very distracting to me. And this one, PiXEL-DAN, does not have any of that. So he's done a really great job eliminating the gaps and making it just look like a one kind of solid unit. And while the set is a little larger than what I think most people would configure minifigure scale, you can easily picture kind of a slightly larger Obi-Wan Kenobi squeezing into the cockpit here, and I think everything else is proportioned actually pretty nicely. This model requires 151 elements and just 393 pieces. The stand is available separately, and I definitely think the parts for the stand should be included, or at least the file for the stand should be included in the download, in case people don't read the model description on Rebrickable. The stand doesn't actually add a bunch of extra costs, I think maybe $3 or so, and all you need to do is add one 2x2 round brick in black, part 3941, to the stand parts list. I happen to have a 2x2 fluted round brick, which also obviously works just fine. On the whole, PiXEL-DAN did a great job using commonly available parts, and specified the two elements that are hidden in the standard red, signifying they can be any color. You can change this to not applicable in your parts list before you run the algorithm. I'll fully admit that I have no major issues with the parts usage in this model. It's very cost efficient, so the recommendations I'm making here are basically splitting hairs. And by the way, those two pieces that can be any color are right behind these wedges here. And it's these snot bricks. For the astromech head, the designer has recently changed the part required to the newest version that came in set 75333, and that's part 553PX4. This is by far the least expensive of the 5 existing R4 P17 headpieces, but if you got one already, of course it might make sense to use the others. And also, depending on your preference, you may want to have the entire minifigure for slightly more money. In this case, the most economical is again the newest one, and that is minifigure SW1221. The other somewhat expensive piece is the tile round 2x2 with Star Wars Republic pattern, part 4150PS6, and this is the printed tile. There are a number of stickered 2x2 round tiles that will all work, and if you've got set 75333, the 2x2 stickered tile in dark red also works really well here. For the stand, you can easily swap the 6-9L Technic lift arms for longer ones if you've already got them. I don't think I'd go longer than really the 11L Technic lift arm, but 13 would also work. Any longer than that, the 15, that would be probably out to about here, and it might start looking a little disproportionate, but if you've already got them and want to save some money, that's a good option. And since there are so few pieces in general, there aren't really any rare or expensive pieces. Using pick-a-brick really doesn't help you very much, and there were no obvious candidates for buying from pick-a-brick. PiXEL-DAN's Delta-7 instructions have 177 steps, and each part or subassembly you add in each step is outlined in red against a pink background. This is certainly not a common color choice, but in general it works just fine. And each step typically only contains 1 or 2 elements, so the build goes along at a pretty good pace. There's no need to do any significant sorting ahead of time, and the build took me about an hour and a half from start to finish. Furthermore, the build is very straightforward. There aren't any tricky or finicky connections, and at the time I was building this was a very relaxing thing for me. Everything just kind of goes together in a logical way, and like I said at the time, this is pretty much exactly what I needed. The model is suitable for any level of builder, and I did not have any sequencing or viewing angle problems in the instructions either. So overall, this is a very good set of instructions, and the designer did a very good job with them. This model is very sturdy and therefore is very swishable. There are no major sections with loose connections, and this will stand up to pretty much anything that you can throw at it. I only noticed a couple of areas that can be an issue, and the first, like you just saw, are the engines, and this is mostly just because you're putting your hand exactly where the engines are. So the problem is mostly when you grip this, if you bump the engines, they're basically acting just as like a large lever, and they're pretty easy to pry off. Of course, on the flip side, they're easy to put back on. So either you tend to take the entire thing off like that, or sometimes just due to how this subassembly is constructed, they break off right here. The greebling on the back of the wing, especially the binocular element, are pretty easy to knock off, even though the pneumatic tee and the bar with clip, the clip with bar holder are fairly secure. The binocular connection isn't as deep, so the pneumatic tee doesn't get as much grip there. I think to fix this, maybe there's a way to use a bracket piece, or even just a couple more of the roller skate pieces. You can barely see one back there. Maybe if you just did 3 of those, that would be enough. And that would make it much less prone to accidental damage. While the rear landing gear skids are held in place very securely, you can see there's a couple layers of reinforcement here. There actually is nothing to reinforce this connection here. And these fingered hinges, if you've used them before, there's actually a fair bit of resistance, so you can see how easily that pops off. So I think all we need here is just another inverted, probably white 2x2 curve slope to lock that down. And finally, the cockpit connection point is a 1x2 brick with a couple of clips on top. And this tends to come loose a lot when I try and open up the cockpit, as the clips have a fair bit of friction. Now, I did use the older clips here, but I did try this with the newer style. This is the newer style is the O clip, while I guess these were the... I can't remember why they changed them, but I'll throw up a couple pictures here. Anyway, this is a problem with both types of clip, just take my word for it. Of course, this assembly is very easy to put back in place, but I think this would be the best change if the designer revisits this model, because I think this is the play feature that most people are going to use. PiXEL-DAN's Delta-7 is a very good-looking model, and this easily gets my recommendation. It strikes a great balance between accuracy, durability, and affordability. Bricklink's algorithm gave me just 3 stores and $37 without shipping and tax for the vanilla parts list and the stand, which comes out to about $55 including shipping and tax. I did run the parts list through Pick-a-Brick, and out of the 163 elements required, 155 were available as of mid-February 2023. The problem is that while I met the threshold to waive the handling fee for Pick-a-Brick standard elements, there was only about $9 worth of bestseller elements, which means I had to pay the extra $3.50 handling fee. The total for Pick-a-Brick was $54, including the handling fee and tax, but of course shipping was free. The remaining elements on Bricklink were available from one store for about $5 total, or about $11 including shipping and tax. The grand total was about $65. This isn't very surprising, as smaller models tend to benefit less from Pick-a-Brick, and most of the elements are common and therefore inexpensive on the used market. Instructions for this model are available for a very reasonable $3.99 on Rebrickable, and there will be a link to them in the description, as well as to the designer recommended stand, for which the instructions are available for free. Thanks again for watching my review of PiXEL-DAN's Delta-7. If you built the model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Remember to leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel, or follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, and I hope to see you back next time.